All right. So we're going to kind of just combine the two together, what would have been today and what would have been Thursday. And it might go a little long today, but otherwise we should be good. So we are going to share a little bit about how that game, that like cornucopia farming game went. We're going to learn a little bit more about protein. We're going to talk about how do we actually get our food? What are the different ways that farmers grow our food and then it gets to us? We're going to learn a little bit about the nutrition of plant versus animal nutrition, or plant versus animal protein, the nutrition of both. And then we'll talk about the next hands-on activity, okay? So we'll start. How did that game go? Did anyone like it? Was there anything about it that surprised you? You guys can either chat in or you can unmute yourself and share. 23 says, I loved it. How come? What did you love about it, 23?
I love that we get to learn how many plants take seasons and how many protein comes in each one and vegetables.
That's awesome. I love that. That's fantastic. What a good lesson to learn. And 50 says, I'm still playing the game because I did not run out of water. That's incredible. Anyone else like it or not? If you didn't like it, that's okay too. You guys, I just want to know how it went. Did anything about it surprise you? Were you like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that? 20 says, I liked it because it was fun, but as a vegetarian, you didn't like having to grow meat. Oh, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that there are some times where you get an order where you have to grow like cows or something. Whereas that's not really the real world. Like in the real world, if you're a vegetarian, you could just grow beans or something instead. That's a good point. Thanks for sharing, 20. 50 says how much water some crops need to use. Yeah, that's what surprised me the most, was that some crops use so much more water than others. Yeah, good points. So so now we'll switch to the drawing that you guys would have made after you played the game. What crops or animals did you grow or raise in your drawing? And why did you choose those? I saw some super beautiful drawings on Class Dojo. So tell us a little about them. Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and we're going to learn a little bit more about protein, to like animal and plant protein, but kind of more like how the two different ones are grown, okay? So we have two protein sources that maybe you would have seen in the game. We have potatoes, which is a plant protein source, and eggs, which is an animal protein source, okay? Oh, someone is saying in the chat, we grew strawberries, lettuce, and soybeans because they provide vegetables and protein, but don't take much water. Yeah, yes, definitely. Those were some of the ones that I found myself growing a lot in that game too, because they gave you everything you needed nutrition-wise and protein-wise, but without a lot of water. Super great point. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so if we have eggs and potatoes, if you guys have ever had those foods that you've bought from the store, what are some of the labels that you've seen on them that might give you a sense of how they were grown or raised? And I know that's kind of a tricky question, but think about if you were to look at the egg or the potato bag or like the egg container at your house, for those of you that might eat those things, what are some of the things that you've seen on the packaging that maybe you've noticed before? Oh, wow. 23 was sharing what they grew in their garden picture. Chicken, cows, blueberry bush, apple tree, pear tree, carrot, and that's all I think I had. Beautiful. Such a great garden. All right, so I think this is like kind of a tricky question. So I'm going to show some pictures. So on potatoes, you might see something like this symbol right here. Has anyone ever seen this on any of their food before? Yeah? I see some thumbs up. If you've ever seen this before, or you can either chat in yes or show a thumbs up. So this is the USDA organic sign, which if that's on your food, that means that it was grown organically. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. And then on eggs, there's usually like a million different kinds of labels. These are some pictures of ones I was able to find. So you might see things that say free range, like this yellow and red one. You might see ones that say cage free. You might see things that say heritage breed eggs. You might see things that say organic. Okay. Or you might see something that all it really says on it is like fresh grade A large. So there's lots of different labels on something like eggs. Oh, and 5 is saying, yes, we normally only get organic. Yeah, so there's lots of different ways that your food can come. And so if your food has an organic label on it, then that means it was grown organically. And we'll talk about what that means in just a second. And then if you don't see an organic label on your food, then that probably means it was grown something called conventionally, which is just kind of like the opposite of organic. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. So another question, if you guys have ever heard of organic, conventional, or like cage-free or pasture-raised, any of those words, do you guys have any idea what they might mean? Let's take one example. What do you guys think the word cage-free means when we're talking about eggs? 5 says cage-free maybe means the chickens aren't in cages. Yeah, that's exactly right. So if they're cage-free eggs, it means that certainly at least during the day, the chickens are free to kind of roam in like on, out in a barn or maybe out on pasture or something like that. And they don't live their whole lives in cages. They might go into a cage at night so that they're like feel protected and have their little nest. But during the day, they don't have a cage. Yeah, exactly. So that's one example. Now, what if we said pasture raised? Kind of similar, but a little different from cage free. What do you guys think pasture raised might mean? Does anyone know what a pasture is? 5 says a field. Yeah, exactly. It's a farm field. So if it's pasture raised, it means that the chickens are allowed to be out in the fields. Not only do they not have cages, but they get to be out in the fields, okay? And unfortunately, if a carton of eggs doesn't say pasture raised or cage free, it probably means the chickens spend most of their life in cages. They don't go outside very much. So that's one thing you can look for if you're if that's something that your family thinks about when you pick your foods. Okay, so I'm going to share some more definitions of these words. So as far as if some of the methods organic versus conventional, cage-free or pasture-raised are better for the health of the animals or the soil, we actually see that if you see a label that says organic, it actually means that very few chemicals were used when your food was grown. And if it doesn't have that organic label, it probably means that there were more chemicals grown on your food, unfortunately. Usually the flip side is that conventional, like non-organic food is more productive. We get a lot more out of the fields than we do when it's organic. But the flip side of that is that there's often more chemicals. And then for some of these definitions, cage-free or pasture-raised, for cage-free or pasture-raised eggs, for example, the chickens kind of roam free outside of their cages versus living in a small cage all day. A lot of times, if they're cage-free or pasture-raised, because they're out on those fields, they actually eat mostly grass or like little flowers or different kinds of things like that. If they live in a cage, they oftentimes eat a lot of corn because they can't go out to a field to find like the grasses and the weeds and stuff. And 20 said, our eggs say free range. Is that the same thing? So free range is very similar to cage free or pasture raised. It means that they don't spend their time during the day in a cage, that they're able to be free. If you see something that says pasture raised, that means specifically that they eat out in a field. Eggs or chickens can be cage free or free range, and they're not in cages, but they're still like within a barn. So they're not necessarily out in grass on a field. So great question. So if you have something that's pasture raised or cage free, it usually means that there's not quite as many chickens because they all need a little more space. Whereas if it's not cage free, or pasture raised or free range, there's a lot more animals in a smaller space. So the good thing about that is that it's a lot more productive. The bad thing about that is that the animals are kind of cramped. So there's no right or wrong answer with a lot of this. It's just kind of, they're very different ways of growing. And then similarly, if you have a lot of animals in a small space, sometimes they get sicker more often, so they need more medicines to keep them healthy. So there's oftentimes more medicines that are involved. But if they're cage-free or pasture-raised, they have a little more space. Their bacteria and whatnot, or their diseases are less likely to spread. It's just kind of like humans. If we have more space, we don't spread disease quite as easily. And so there's usually a few less medicines having to be given to the animals. And 5 says they put them in a cage at night to protect them, correct? And you're totally right. Even cage-free, pasture-range, or free-range hens usually go into a cage at night just to be protected from like hawks or owls that would prey on them. Yeah, very good. Oh, someone says their food says non-GMO. What does that mean? Awesome question. So GMO stands for genetically modified organism. And what that means is that a scientist or a farmer kind of like tweaked the seed that grows it's usually non-GMO, something you would see on a food source that comes from plants. And it means that the seed that grew that plant has kind of been tweaked by a farmer or a scientist to actually have different properties than it originally did. So a really good example is that there's a type of rice that's grown in Africa where there's not a lot of water, and the rice is a GMO rice seed that's been modified so that it doesn't need very much water to grow. It can grow in a drought really well, whereas normal rice needs a lot of water to grow. That's like one example. Does that kind of make sense? It's kind of an interesting idea we've come so far in science that we can kind of play with seeds so that they have more qualities than originally had, so to speak. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next question or the next thought. All right, so the other difference between some of these things that you might see on your food is actually how much work is involved by humans. So something that is organic and they use a lot less chemicals and everything needs a little more space tends to have a lot more manual labor, because it just takes more people to do a lot of those jobs when they're smaller farms and they don't use as many machines. Whereas a lot of times in like conventional growing or that kind of thing, there's a lot more machines that do the work. So like you could think of like a small family farm where the cows go out to eat on the pasture. You know, the farmer has to corral them at the end of the day and bring them in and check them, make sure they didn't get injured, that they're happily fed, put out their water, all that kind of thing. Whereas cows that are grown in a barn, kind of in their stalls, they probably have kind of like machines that water them and milk them and do a lot of those tasks. So usually something that's conventional or doesn't have like the organic or some of those like cage-free, pasture-range labels, there's often a lot more machines and less people involved. Something else. So kind of flip side, there's no right or wrong way to get your food. They're all just kind of different methods of growing or raising animals. Okay, so what I would love for everyone to do is we are going to play a game. Can everyone get a piece of paper and something to write with? And when you're ready, if you want to give me a thumbs up or chat into the chat that you're ready. Everyone get a piece of paper and something to write with. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want you guys to draw 5 big boxes kind of spread out on your paper that look something like this. And I want you to write the following words into those boxes: the word farm, grocery store, my garden, corner store, and farmer's market. Okay, I know this is a little different, but once you have that, then I want you again to give me a thumbs up or chat that you're ready. Okay, I think we're all ready. So what's going to happen is on the next page, I'm going to show you those 5 places that we could get our food, right? So a farm, a grocery store, if you had a garden, this could be imaginary, right? Not everyone has a farm or, oops, I think someone's putting some fun hearts on my slide. That's all right, it's cute. Okay, so I know not everyone has a farm or a garden, but pretend that you had a farm, there was a garden, a grocery store, a little corner store, like maybe if you're in a downtown area and there's those little corner stores that sell, you know, gum and snacks, but maybe also sometimes there's food in them, or a farmer's market, okay? These are 5 places where we might be able to get your food. And then I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you some questions about how you think the food would be in each of these places based on what you think. There's no right or wrong answer, okay? So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're basically going to label each of these 5 places with your answer. And this will make more sense in just a second, I promise. I know this is all a little vague right now, but so here's our 5 places. Okay, so question 1, where do you think that your food might be the freshest, least fresh, and maybe like medium fresh, okay? So what you're gonna do is on that paper where you had your 5 boxes, I want you to label on the 5 places, pick one that you think would be the freshest, where your food would be the very freshest, and write that on the box. Pick the one where you think the food would be the least fresh, right? Like it's been the longest since we got it from from wherever it came from, and label that. And then the rest of them are like medium fresh, and you label them with that. Does that kind of make sense? We're giving this a shot. This would normally be like a game. We do a different version of it in person, but trying to play kind of a fun virtual game. So when you have them labeled, give me a thumbs up or chat in that you are ready. Oh, sorry, a bodega is the same thing as like a corner store. So like if you've ever been like in maybe like a downtown area or whatever, and you see like a little tiny storefront that they sell like gum and they sell like snacks, but maybe they also have a tiny little section where they sell some fruits and vegetables or something. And it's okay if you think 2 are the freshest. That's actually also okay. Someone asked that question. If you think 2 are equally the freshest, that's totally fine, okay? All right, I think we're gonna go on to our next question. Where do you think your food would be the cheapest, the most expensive, or like medium expensive, okay? So label, same thing on those same boxes. So like you might have a box like that already has one word, find another space somewhere near the box and write now where you think your food is the cheapest, the most expensive, or medium expensive. And when you're ready, let me know, either chat in that you're done or you're ready, or give me a thumbs up, okay? And it's okay if there are 3 mediums. Someone said in your own garden you don't have to pay, so that probably answers one of the questions, right? So where do you think would require the most transportation for you personally, the least transportation, and like medium transportation? So basically, in which of these places would you have to drive or bike or walk the furthest, the least, and like in the middle, okay? So that is actually the end of that activity. So before we do this next thing, do you guys want to either hold up your piece of paper or unmute and share or chat in how you labeled each thing? Okay, I see 50, your hand up. Do you want to share? Okay, you can unmute yourself if you want.
So I did for my garden. It's the cheapest, it's the freshest, and it's the least transportation.
Cool. Awesome. Do you want to share any of the other ones, how you labeled them?
I did farm, medium transportation, freshest, medium expensive.
Okay, cool. Awesome. That's awesome. And do you want to share any other ones? Or you can also be done if you want. I don't want to keep putting you on the spot, but.
Medium, for the corner store, I did medium transportation, most expensive, and least fresh.
Okay, awesome. That's super great. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, I see another hand up.
For my one, it's the freshest for my garden because there's no like preservatives or anything that someone put in there. It's the cheapest because I don't have to pay for what I grow, and it's the least farthest.
Awesome. That's great. Were there any other ones that you wanted to share? Or just that?
Yeah, I did 2 further ones because we have to drive or walk or bike to the grocery store and the farm.
Cool.
And I said the least freshest one is the farmer's market.
Okay.
No, the freshest one of the fresh ones, medium fresh ones are from the farmer's market, and the least fresh is the corner store.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I see that 5 also wanted to share. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us?
Okay. For the farm, it's the most farthest, and the prices are like medium because they're not like super cheap or like super expensive.
Okay.
And it's the freshest. And then the grocery store is probably the most expensive. And it's like I didn't label why I wrote the thing, so I can't remember anymore.
That's okay, no problem.
So it says middle. I'm assuming that's the distance. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. I really appreciate your sharing. Did anyone else want to share anything else about their drawing or how they labeled? Oh, wait a second. See. Oh, okay. 24 typed in. Great. So farm was most transportation, medium money, but the freshest. Okay, cool. Very good. I like it. And 24, if you want to chat in any other of your labeling, feel free, okay? 5 said they don't like speaking on Zoom. You did a great job, though, so you shouldn't be nervous at all. That was great. All right, so I think we will go on. Miss Harrison wants to share a little bit about some nutrition of animal versus plant protein. If anyone else decides that they want to share about their drawing, please let us know, but I think we'll move on otherwise, okay?
All right, so earlier we were talking about animal and plant-based proteins, and I want to talk a little bit about the nutrition. So how are they similar? How are they different? What kind of things are inside of them, and kind of link it to things that we've talked about in the past. Because in the past, we've talked about the nutrition of different fruits and the nutrition of different vegetables. So now we're going to talk about those animal versus those plant-based proteins. Next slide, please. Okay. We have some examples that we said before. Does anyone have examples they want to share or other foods they can think of that would be either an animal or a plant protein? You can give an example of either. You can unmute, you can type. Did I cover it basically? Maybe I covered a lot of the options in the chart there. So you see an animal, yeah, so 5 said yes. So an animal, it's anything that's part of the animal, so like meat or like fish, or something that comes from an animal, so like dairy and eggs. And last class we had talked about, you know, what vegetarian means, what vegan means. Some vegetarians will eat stuff that comes from the animal, but they won't eat the actual animal. And there's all sorts of different kind of ways that people approach this. But so the whole animal category has the parts of the animal and stuff that comes from the animal. Does that make sense to people? Good. And then the plant protein is basically every other protein. You know, it's the stuff that comes from plants. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a really broad category. There's stuff like beans, nuts, grains. So grains would be like whole grain bread, whole wheat bread, oats, stuff like that, rice. Other things are peanut butter, tofu. So all of those are foods that come from plants, and they have high amounts of protein. Okay, so then the next thing I want to look at is the type of fat. Has anyone heard about, you know, what kind of fat is in animal foods versus in plant foods? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Something they heard? But okay, if we look at the types of fat in an animal protein, it's mostly saturated fat. So that's a type of fat. And that's kind of a less healthy type of fat. And you'll only find saturated fat in animal proteins, in food that comes from animals. Okay, so animal proteins, they'll have those mostly saturated fats, and they're a little bit less healthy. And that's why you may hear people saying to not eat as much animal protein. So you can still eat it, but maybe don't eat as much of it because it has that saturated fat in it. And in comparison, the plant proteins have mostly unsaturated. Now they do sometimes have saturated because they're kind of all a mix, but they have mostly unsaturated. Those are those healthy fats, like the stuff in olive oil or walnuts or avocado. So super healthy, good quality fats. The next difference is the amount of protein. So they're all foods that have protein in them, but usually, and this is very broad, but usually animal proteins have more protein. So like per dish or per serving, there's usually a higher amount of protein in there. So the plant proteins have a little bit less, but that's because they have whole other nutrients in them. They have that fiber, they have carbs, they have fat. So animal proteins have more protein per serving, and then plant proteins have a little bit less usually. And then fiber. Animal protein will not have fiber. Fiber comes from plants, right? We talked about how fiber comes from plants. It's like the strings of celery or the skin of an apple. You won't find that in any animal protein. And I see 46 asking, which one is healthier? So it's kind of like I've said before, everything is a balance. You eat a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you kind of balance everything out. So the healthiest way to approach it would be to eat more plant protein and some animal protein. So plant protein is usually a go food, and animal protein is usually a slow or a whoa. Yeah, it depends, exactly. So there's room for both, but you can see that there's kind of healthy qualities and unhealthy qualities in both. And the last thing is vitamins and minerals. Some of those things that we talked about, like vitamin C, A, B12, those things. And animal protein usually has more things like iron, vitamin D, vitamin B12. And then plant proteins usually have more of every other vitamin, every other mineral. And plants do also have some of that B12, iron, and D, just not as much. So it's kind of like a balance. So you might eat some, cheese or milk or yogurt to get some vitamin D, but then you also need those plants for things like vitamin A and C, because you probably won't find that in animal protein. So it's all a balance. That makes sense to everybody? This is all very broad because obviously, within animal you have meat, you have dairy, you have fish, you have all this stuff, and it all has different, people saying like a seesaw. It's like a seesaw. So you're in the middle, just trying to keep it balanced. So that was a very brief overview. Does that make sense to people?
I love the analogy of nutrition like a seesaw, keeping it balanced, that there's no even if you swing all the way to one side, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that the goal of a seesaw is to keep it balanced, but you're not ever in trouble if you lose balance. I love that analogy, 46. That's awesome. Thank you. And Ms. Harrison, sorry that the slide kept going. Zoom is really sensitive to certain places. So
that's okay.
All right, so we are going to, I saw people asking, we're going to talk about your hands-on activity that you'll do at home, and then we'll be done for today. There's two things you guys are going to do as your hands-on activity. The first is going to be kind of learning a little bit more about the difference and how foods are grown, and specifically this one, like plant versus animal proteins. And this one's called the Eat Low Carbon Quiz. So the idea is that some foods take a lot more energy to grow than others. It's kind of like what you guys learned when you play that game, how some foods took a lot more water. It also turns out that some foods produce a lot more what they're called greenhouse gases. So it's like CO2 or methane or some of these gases that have contributed to global warming and may or may not be good for our planet. And so this quiz kind of walks you through different foods and how much energy it actually takes the planet to produce them. Oh, I see a hand up. Go ahead. I'm going to unmute you.
So my mom, once she told me, I asked her why cannot we grow the pineapple or the avocado. She told me that it's like it takes more heat, like it needs to grow in places like California or Mexico.
Yes, you're exactly right. Yeah, you're totally right. So there's certain foods that don't even grow here in New Jersey because it's just too cold. Yeah, or it's not warm enough long enough in the year. Super great point. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so for the at-home activity, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take this quiz, and after you finish, you're going to read through all of what are called the food scores, just to kind of learn about different environmental impacts of our food. Okay, it's kind of like a different version of like the last activity where we kind of learned about like the different amounts of water the different foods take. Okay, and then after that, I want you guys to draw a picture of a snack or meal that you would want to eat that could be one of the lowest carbon food, like would have the lowest carbon food score. And you're going to label the different ingredients in your meals. Okay, and if it's a protein, if there's protein in the meal, label if it's like plant or animal based protein. Okay, so this is kind of an activity that's pulling everything together that we've learned about plant and animal protein. So you're going to take the quiz, kind of read through a little bit more about the different food scores for your different foods, and then you're going to draw a picture of a snack or meal you'd want to eat that has a low carbon food score, that you would think would have a low carbon food score based off what you learned from this little quiz activity. Okay, and then you're going to label the ingredients in your snack. That is one of your activities that you're going to do. The second activity is you're actually going to get to make a recipe, a protein recipe. Okay, so they're called no bake energy seed balls. They're delicious, and they have lots of nuts and seeds in them that make them have a lot of protein, but they're plant-based protein. Okay, so you're going to watch a video that Miss Harrison found about measuring properly, and then you're going to make this delicious no-bake energy seed ball recipe that we have a video for you. And then you're going to upload 2 pictures or videos this time. One will be of the drawing that you make of your low carbon snack. Okay, and one will be a picture of the recipe that you're going to make. Okay, so you have 2 activities to do. Both of them should be pretty quick this time, but we're making up for the class that we lost on Thursday. Okay, does this make sense to everyone? We are going to post this slide. We're going to post all of the instructions on Class Dojo very shortly before the end of the day. Okay, all right, last final thing is we're just going to do a quick exit ticket like we always do. Okay, so same thing, you guys can either unmute and share, or you can chat into the chat the answers to these questions. So do you think that you could grow enough potatoes or raise enough chickens at your own home to feed your family? Why or why not? Do you think you could grow enough potatoes or enough chickens for eggs to feed your family at home? Okay, 5 says yes, because people in my town have chickens and get eggs. Okay. 46 says I could, but it would take a lot of work. I agree. It would take a lot of work to grow enough eggs or potatoes. 50 says me too, and 5 says yeah, same. Okay, so maybe it would be possible, but it would take a lot of work. So I think you guys just answered my next question, which was, do you think most people grow their own food? Why or why not? 5 says depends if they have enough land. 46 says yes. 5 said it would be easier. Oh, if you had enough land, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Cheaper? Yeah, probably would be a lot cheaper to grow your own food. More fresh? Yeah. Yep, very true. But how come a lot of people don't grow a lot of their own food? How come? Why do a lot of people not grow their own food? Or like at least enough food to like actually fill themselves. So 5 says we have a blueberry bush, but the birds and squirrels and animals eat it, right? Okay, so maybe you try to grow your own food, but you have pests or animals that get in the way. And 5 said animals get to it. 50 says you don't have enough time. Yeah, that's a huge one. You don't have enough time. And 50 also said too much work. And 20 says they have enough money to buy their own food, but it takes a lot of work to grow your own. Yeah, you guys are all hitting the nail on the head, right? It's a lot of work. You guys are finding from just growing the plant that we started at the beginning that like weather got in the way, or an animal ate it, or you didn't water it enough, or you went on vacation and then you couldn't water the plant and it died, right? Like it's a lot of work to grow your own food. Great points. Okay, and then last question. Oh, 46 says time, work, and stress. Yeah, there you go, exactly. Okay, and last question to think more about the nutrition side of protein. What is one of your favorite high protein snacks? You can type in or share. And then let us know whether it's animal or plant protein. What is your favorite protein snack or meal? And is it animal or plant protein? 5 says your protein shakes. Animal. Okay. Probably like the milk and stuff, right? Makes it animal. 50 says, I don't know. That's okay. 20 says eggs, which are animal. Okay, cool. Nice. I also love eggs. 5 says your brother loves eggs. Milk. Yeah. Okay. And is milk plants or animal? Animal. Very good. Okay. 23 says chicken. Yep. Okay. And is chicken plants or animal? 46 says peanut butter. Is peanut butter plant or animal? Okay. 23 says chickens is animal. 46 says peanut butter is plant. All right. Very good, guys. So that is the end of our lesson today.